Welcome to Vancouver Overcast, the podcast where we hear from influential city builders. I'm your host, Mike Klassen, Vancouver City Councillor. It's great to be back for another episode happening during the month of July 2024. Right now, the weather is warm outside and you can really feel the streets coming alive here in the city with music and celebrations like the International Jazz Festival, Catalano on West 4th, or the Gastown Grand Prix cycling race. This month I'm serving as Deputy Mayor, which is taking me to dozens of events, bringing greetings on behalf of the city, and it really has been an honor for me to connect with so many people in our beautiful and vibrant city. On the podcast today, we're speaking with urban planner and development consultant and founder of Livable City Planning Ltd, Michael Mortensen. Michael is a seasoned urban planner and development strategist who has left an indelible mark on Vancouver's skyline. His career trajectory has encompassed many roles within the public service and private sector that have led him to transforming neighborhoods and communities within Vancouver and beyond. As a graduate student at UBC, Michael was one of the last students of the legendary city builder Walter Hardwick. He then served for 5 years at the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, overseeing their co-op, non-profit, First Nations housing projects right across British Columbia. His involvement with the City of Vancouver's Development Permit Board Advisory Panel during the early 2000s was a turning point. Larry Beasley, then Director of Planning, and Rick Scobie recognized his talent and recruited him to the major projects planning team. There, Mortensen contributed to numerous transformative projects, including co-authoring the Oak Ridge Centre Policy Plan. In 2008, Grosvenor's America beckoned. Mortensen's work on the Rise at 8th and Cambie garnered the prestigious ULI Global Award of Excellence. He also worked to create vibrant mixed-use residential spaces in London and in Edinburgh. He began his own company, Livable City Planning Ltd, where he navigates the complexities of both private and public sector developments. Recently, he crafted a strategic land use plan for the Squamish Nation and rezoned Skeena Terrace for over 2,000 social housing units. And with that introduction, I'm very pleased to have him on the episode. Michael Mortensen, I'm glad to have you on the Vancouver Overcast podcast. So we've known each other really through, I think, a few things. Obviously, my work in council now, but we had opportunities to engage earlier. And your presence on social media has always been something that I've been able to notice. How did you kind of develop that comfort level? Because you're not only representing yourself, but you're representing the company and the work that you do.
Yeah. So I think it's probably my background as first a student of the city. I came, when I moved here in 1990. I found myself in this magical place, a beautiful city set in the mountains beside the ocean, and I got kind of hooked on this idea of cities and sustainability. So it began, like my curiosity began, I think, primarily as an academic kind of curiosity as a master's student. And then I went to go work for CMHC in affordable housing, and I got right into that, managing all of the co-ops, nonprofit programs, First Nations on reserve programs, urban native programs that the feds offered through up until the 90s, early 90s. And then I went to go work for the city, and previous to that served on the Development Permit Board as an advisor. So I was thoroughly imbricated in all of these city issues. First from an academic perspective, and then from the perspective of someone working in housing and affordable housing, and then from the perspective of someone reviewing all sorts of major project proposals, and then actually working for the city and understanding the myriad of city interests at play with development. And then being, sort of moved out into the private sector to work for people actually building things, moving from being an urban planner to working as a development manager and seeing the sort of on-the-ground realities of what that's like. So I think it's my perspective that draws me to jump into debates and to call things out when I see inaccuracies or misrepresentations, because I think I have a pretty rounded perspective. City interests, public interests, affordable housing, and then the interest that is a pragmatic interest of private developers and builders.
Tell us a little bit about your journey to Vancouver and what it was like when you got here. And
yeah. I came first in 1990 to visit with my girlfriend at the time and a roommate, and we found a little apartment. Oh no! First we found a little secondary suite in South Vancouver, and we stayed there the night. And I said, no, this isn't what I moved from Ontario to experience. So we actually picked up our stuff and we found an apartment downtown on Pacific and Beach, and spent the summer here. Cycled to San Francisco down the 101. Then I went back to London to finish my degree, and I grew up in the Caribbean as a kid. My mom's Jamaican. I grew up in Jamaica and a couple other places in the Caribbean. And so I've always lived by the ocean. So it was a powerful draw. So while I was in London, when I went back, I thought I have to get back. So June of 1990, I got on a bicycle, 4 bags, just headed west, up across Manitoulin Island, out towards Sault Ste. Marie, west, and over the Rockies and here. So the city was a powerful draw.
And you went to school then, right? You did a master's?
Yeah. I think it was that sort of, that aha. It's like this. What do I want to do? I thought I'd teach, and then I discovered that my undergrad didn't give me a teachable major that was going to work for the secondary school system. So I started taking urban geography courses, and then when I applied to Teachers College, they told me I was a half credit short in history. I said, you got to be joking. I've studied psychopharmacology, child development. That's not, they were just giving me the gears. So I literally walked across campus and walked into the geography faculty, walked upstairs, sat down with the dean and said, I'd like to do a master's in cities and sustainability. And then he said, well, I've got someone to introduce you to. So introduced me to Walter Hardwick. And so I did a master's degree with Walter called Retrofitting Suburbs finished that in 1997. So think about it, it's 27 years ago.
It's a little while ago.
I was studying what to do with post-war Vancouver's post-war suburbs outside of the ring of, the streetcar suburb city. So it's still germane today.
What do you remember about learning from Walter Hardwick?
Oh, wow. He's a pracademic. He wasn't just an academic who just researched things and spoke about them secondhand. Walter was someone who actually developed a lot of stuff. I mean, I think he was the father of False Creek, at least from the city side, in terms of the renewal and redevelopment of the creek as a mixed use. It was pretty groundbreaking at the time, mixed use community, brownfield redevelopment. But he also developed multifamily buildings. Him and his brother, They hired Bing Tom. They went, got development applications, development permits, building permits, financing for rental, built and rented and operated apartment buildings. So I call him a pracademic, and I know these things because my fingerprints are on the wall next to his fingerprints. Because I had a painting company when I was a teenager. And when he discovered that, he said, oh, you can come and help me paint some apartments. So he and I would paint apartments, listen to CBC, as it happens, some Sunday morning. He's a wonderful guy, a mentor, very inspirational, didn't suffer fools, smart guy. And in a way, his civic commitment in running for council and stopping the freeway and coming up with alternate visions for different parts of the city was a driver for me. His inspirations. When I finished my grad program and started working, I thought I want to do something civic. So I applied for the Development Permit Board. That changed my life. I mean, I literally every 2 weeks I'd get 4 major project applications couriered to my door, and it dawned on me like, wow, this is a lot of really interesting stuff, and it forced me to learn about development.
You worked for the city of Vancouver for a length of time?
About 4 years.
Yeah. What kind of person do you think is most successful in terms of working in the public service? I mean, you had your time there, but you probably worked with a lot of others that perhaps maybe even still here today or were there for a long time. And what was your sort of experience and you recall about what it was like to work for the city?
I loved working for the city. It was, at that time, the downtown was pretty much doubling in population. So, if you look at the Development Permit Board schedule today, I think it's crickets. There's not a lot going on in the DP schedule. But back then, we'd have 3 or 4 major projects every 2 weeks. But in terms of, there was a lot going on. And there were a lot of and there still are. I mean, a lot of really committed. I love working for the city. I was super committed to public service, to seeing development happen. You know, as an urban planner, I didn't see my job as the outcome was let's get things done, and consult the public, address the city's interests, and then see things move forward. And there are a lot of really interesting, creative people working for the city who were passionate about making sure the city's interests were covered, but then also that business gets done. So, I mean, the person who had to be from the Development Permit Board to come work for the city was, there were two. It was Rick Scobie, he was the former director of Development Services, and then Larry Beasley, who was the director of planning at the time. And there was kind of a leadership cadre at the city that was really focused on public service, you know. Larry is a good example. I mean, in terms of a public servant who really understood development, who really understood the pragmatic side of things, could cover and really understand the public interests, you know, but then was sophisticated enough to know the business of development. I think, to me, that's one of the core things, is really to understand the business and economics of development.
I met with the person in charge of planning for the city of Kingston. I was introduced to her by Brent Todderan, and I have family in Kingston, and so I was lucky enough to be able to arrange a sit down and have a coffee with her. And one of the things we talked about was, you know, her work in terms of building a really good work culture in sort of her department. And one of her examples to me was being able to understand what it's like to be a developer. And there were kind of silos within the civil service that she tried to break down by kind of requiring people to spend a bit more time working closely, either together or taking on different responsibilities. But certainly the key thing for her was to be able to work closely with industry to kind of get into their shoes, so to speak. Now that you're outside in the sort of private sector, what do you think of that kind of advice, and how do you go about doing that if you're working within a city?
Yeah, well, it's something I'm committed to, you know, because in addition to running Livable City Planning, I'm an adjunct professor at UBC. I teach at the Sauder School of Business. I teach, you know, commerce and MBA students the pragmatics of development planning and real estate economics. And I do the same for the School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture for UBC Sala. And I have been teaching at SCARP as well too. So I think it's a gap in the education of many planning and design students, is the sort of just development, pragmatic development economics, and the understanding of the business and the drivers, the key interests and motivations. So it's something I do off the side of my desk, and I think it's really critical to understand the full cycle of building. So I think for many urban planners, and I'm a registered urban planner, I'm a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners. I think you know, as a sort of criticism or critique of my profession, I think many of my planning colleagues, they might not say it, but I think a lot of them think that their job is process. And for me, as someone who both plans developments and then helps people execute on them, I have a much different approach. So I get very concerned when we've got people who are creating city policy for development that don't really understand the economics of development. Mm-hmm. I think it's really critical that people who plan the city, and also people who get involved in policy making, and I'm talking about, there are a lot of academics jumping in on the debate, for example, on affordable housing, who can't prepare a reasonable pro forma, you know, can't calculate a mortgage properly. You know, I think that's a big concern. So I think people who are involved in city planning, shaping the city policy around housing and development, really need a fulsome education, not just on the public involvement and the policy planning side of things, but then on the economics, the land economics, the development economics, and the realities of getting things built. You don't connect those two things, you end up with bad policy and bad outcomes.
You're reminding me of the mantra of the Sam Sullivan, who is constantly talking about the importance of having that land economics, that economic understanding and vision to work as a city planner.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the city of Vancouver and where land economics has gone here? Well, it's said that Vancouver has always been unaffordable in terms of its housing, and I remember 30 plus years ago that it always felt very unaffordable, certainly in relation to incomes in our part of the world. But, do you have a better understanding of how we kind of got here a little bit and how we've been able to manage notwithstanding the high costs?
Yeah, I think coastal cities like Vancouver have always had a challenge with affordability. If you zoom out, of course, we live on a peninsula just north of the U.S. border, adjacent to the Pacific Ocean, bordered by a mountain range, a valley, much of which is dedicated for agricultural land. I think the world's 12th largest river running through the middle of it. We have arguably less land within 50K of the city center than most urban centers in North America. Montreal, if you go out, I think 50K from downtown Montreal, you have 8,000 square kilometers of land. Toronto, because of the lake, you've got 4. And I think in Vancouver, because of all of those factors I talked about, I think you've got 1,700 square kilometers. But then you zoom into the city, land is not affordable. I think the policies that set out what can be built on land have been preserved in aspic for a long time. Harlan Bartholomew's late 1920s plan for the city of Vancouver reads pretty sharp and clear in the current map of Vancouver. Those policies have been in place for almost a century, and only until recently have we started challenging a lot of those land use policies that froze zoning. 60% of our city, set aside for single detached homes, while our demographics have moved in a much different direction. But yeah, I think it's the cost of land. The absolute cost of building things, just materials, labor, energy, all of those things, of course, have gone up in price. And then I think government policy and government fees, levies, taxes. I think one of the fastest growing components of housing cost. You don't see it like your gas when you go to the gas. You fill up your car. Although I don't have a car with gas anymore, you kind of see a breakout of taxes on the break.
Pump, yeah.
Yeah, when you buy a house, you don't see that. You don't see that. 4 levels of government are basically putting about 15 to 20% tax on the most expensive thing you'll ever buy in your life is a house. So we've and I think we've had. Over the last 20 years, I think we've seen municipalities, not just Vancouver, but all across BC, Metro Vancouver, start to play in the land extraction game and extracting land lift, the value of new rezoned land. And saying, well, we earned 3. Well, the city of Vancouver has been a leader in that through the early, the latter part of the 90s, early 2000s, saying, well, we're entitled to 75% of the new value created through our rezoning. The developer who assembled the land, who hired the architects, who came up with a plan, who took the risk, who financed all of that, you get a quarter of the new land value, but the city gets 3/4. And there's a myth, I think, going around that those extractions don't impact the price of housing. They come out of the land price, but I think in reality the land price is sticky, and those extractions get added to the bill. And I think you have to acknowledge that city taxes and levies, regional levies, which just went up they're going up 10 times the metro fee increases for water, sewer, a new park levy. There's a TransLink levy that was implemented a while ago. If you add all of those things up, they're probably, on a condominium, probably 20% of the cost of the housing. Mm-hmm. We didn't have that 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yet people are still coming here. So what's your thought or theory as to why people continue to come here?
Well, I think, there's a whole school of thought, on this. You get the Economist city rankings. They have quite a number of criteria. You've got folks like Richard Florida, the academic who talks about cities of culture. It's pretty simple. I mean, I moved from my family was forced from Jamaica by civil unrest. I mean, it was not a safe place to be in the late 1970s. You remember Bob Marley got shot in his house. We left at the same time, and so I think, you know, what do we look for? We look for civil society, environmental quality, a good fair legal system. We've got a great British common law system, economic opportunity, education, good quality education, healthcare, and culture. I mean, and so people come to Vancouver, and they did. You know, they came with Expo '86. They came, and they saw this marvelous city. You know, great quality of life, civil society. You can walk around. You know, think about that as a kid. Like, you know, you're not allowed to walk around on your own anywhere. As a 10-year-old, you know, 12-year-old, and even as a young adult, you know, it's not safe to be out walking around in many cities of the world. Vancouver. Well, we moved to Toronto originally, but frankly, the suburbs of Toronto were, like I said, the Sargasso Sea of my adolescence. Nothing much to do, and you know, they lacked. I think I was really missing the ocean. So when I came here and I found all those other things I talked about, it was like, yeah, no, this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life.
You talked about the time in Jamaica and all the things that are distinctive here, but you know, if we want to kind of dive a little deeper into what the attractions are of our city, yes, we have clean air, clean water, civil society broadly, but we also have a city that's highly cultural in many ways as well. And sometimes it falls into when something doesn't happen, there's a lot of people shouting about the city's not fun enough. But I see right now, and I'm deputy mayor in the month of July, I'm attending an enormous number of festivals. I'm seeing the streets being activated. You know, are we not being fair to ourselves in terms of really appreciating how much kind of cultural activity we have here? I know we can do more, but I think we're doing a pretty good job. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, you know, in the season we have usually a lot of events. You know, we've got the Jazz Fest. We've got, you know, I think we have a number of celebrations that are dependable. You know, that you can. We were just both out at the Gastown bike race. But I think, you know, some of it is it's the rest of the year. You know, I think it's my partners. My wife's from Brazil, and you know, you go out in some cities in Brazil, and you know, 7 p.m. Like, I think here that we still have this sort of British tradition of shutting the lights down and shutting our high streets down at, you know, at 6, and it's pretty quiet. I think part of it is that element of Vancouver life, which is kind of a little quiet and sleepy. I think the other pressures in terms of growth, I don't think we've kept up in terms of, notwithstanding the millions and millions of dollars of of community amenity contributions that we've collected from new development. I think one of the issues is that money goes into a general fund, or has been until now. The province came out with this new amenity cost charge legislation. But I don't think we've been spending enough on community centers and recreation facilities. I travel to some of the municipalities that have been growing quickly outside of Vancouver, and I see a lot of new recreation facilities, and I think Vancouver probably has to play some catch up in terms of spending on really important community facilities. I think that's probably something we could focus on.
We have a healthy city strategy at the City of Vancouver, and when it was brought forward for an update to council recently, I posed the question to staff: is what's stopping us from claiming to be or aspiring to be the healthiest city on the planet, or at least in North America? We have top-notch healthcare facilities, some of the best cancer and heart research, brain research happening within our region. We have some of the lowest smoking rates, I think, on the planet. I think we have lower obesity rates by and large, and we have a very active society. I think those are some of the things that we could be doing. Clearly, what's happening in parts of the city, such as the downtown east side, really signal the opposite. We have a lot of ill people with addictions and mental health issues, all of which need the attention that they deserve. But let's talk a little bit about what makes a city healthier and what kind of things that we could possibly do to try and become that most healthy city.
Sure. I think it's a great question. I think when you look at European cities, places with high, a lot of longevity. I think you see people who are moving more on their own and traveling in vehicles less. I think we have such an outstanding setting that we could be doing. So just disclaimer. I drive a car. I've got a Tesla, so no gasoline. I drive a motorcycle. I rode my bicycle here from London, Ontario to move here, and I used to race bikes, triathlons, fondo. I cycle regularly. I've got a 2-year-old, a 22-year-old, 19-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and I bought a cargo bike so I can shuttle my 2-year-old around. That's how we got to the Gastown race last night. I think if we focus on just the day-to-day, the 10,000 steps, and give people clean, safe, attractive, relatively quiet ways of walking and cycling. We have so. I think the work city's done on cycle routes has been fantastic. We can do way more. I'm one of those people who think we should just shut Stanley Park down for cars, except for people with disabilities, mobility challenges. It's a paradise. It's a park. It's not a parking lot. So I've been pretty vocal on that side of things. I think. Yeah, the community centers, investing in recreation, those are really key things. And I think, that's really important in terms of health and well-being. We have such a great natural setting. I think we could do a lot more. We could become, a world leader that way.
My wife and I went out to dinner very close to our home on Fraser Street recently. There's some really great restaurants that have sprung up in that part of the city.
Yeah, it's popped, that neighborhood.
Yeah, some that are Michelin recognized, either one star or Bib Gourmand, and a place I went to is Bar Bravo. And then as we left there feeling pretty good about a lovely meal and lovely experience there and great service, I started looking around at the neighborhood itself and said, gosh, there's so much really great energy and commerce happening here. There's in that area, I don't see any for lease signs. I think I saw one unit sort of papered up, but know that it'll probably be filled up pretty soon. Our neighborhoods are changing. Our high streets are changing. We're putting a bit more pressure on them, I guess, with new development. How do we continue to strengthen those kind of core neighborhoods of our city, right across the city? And I know you talked about the work you did with Walter way back in energizing suburbs, but
retrofitting suburbs. And I actually did a big study on 6 different local shopping areas for 6 different BIAs. We did a study on sort of just a health and vitality study. What are their top concerns? I think this also relates to the question about this push-pull. Housing affordability. And the pull of the attraction of Vancouver, the push that drives people out, a lot of young families out, is just the unaffordability of housing. But we have a housing affordability problem. We also have an income problem. I think for where we are in the world, I think people here earn less. I think we have a challenge on the income side, and I think widely across Canada, I think there's an appreciation that actually Canada has a productivity problem. We're not as productive as we need to. We're not simply not earning enough money, and so there's 2 things. But I think in terms of the quality and vitality of local, and this is what makes Vancouver exceptionally special, I think, in North America, is that we have a distributed system of retail and service shops. Whereas a lot of cities have super concentrations. It's all in malls, it's all enclosed, it's all privatized. We have, I think, as a legacy of our streetcar system, where the streetcars form nodes, and little concentrations of population, we developed local shopping areas, and we have a distributed system of retail. But I think, when we looked at 6 different business improvement associations, it was Livable City, myself, Andy Yan, Louis Silberberg from commercial marketing, and Don from Lean Associates, I think. And there's 6 of us doing it. We discovered one of the critical things was vitamin D density. I think neighborhoods that were experiencing population growth, new housing, they're putting back the customer base that supports local retail. that allows shops to open and to thrive and survive and hire people and create economic activity. The neighborhoods like Point Greying, I call it, that have historically rejected new growth, rejected new forms of housing, and now face a challenge where they just simply don't have the body heat to sustain vibrant, vital local shopping areas. And it's frankly, I mean, go and look at the 2005 the West Point Grey Plan vision, the vision from 2010. I mean, that community rejected townhouses, pretty reasonable forms of infill and density that would accommodate a wider spectrum of people, more households, more affordable housing, and more population, more young families who spend money, on a daily basis. They rejected that, 10, 20 years ago. ARCS 2005, same thing. I mean, they rejected pretty much everything.
Well, Dunbar and Kensington Cedar Cottage are both 1995.
Yeah. And there wasn't, people didn't embrace change and growth. They wanted to stay. They wanted Vancouver. They wanted, I think there's some politicians we probably know who like to climb into their Back to the Future car and sort of set the dial to 1970 when everything was groovy. You can't. The world doesn't work like that. I think we need to change and adapt. And frankly, the most critical thing for the vitality of local shopping centers is a healthy population. New development will come and replace some of those old shops. And through planning, I think good planning says, look, make that first floor adaptable, relatively high ceilings, and demisable into small bays. And then I think that is the sort of growing medium for local business, small business, mom and pops, and frankly national stores as well too. I think there's kind of a bias against some of those folks, but they're needed, right? And fundamentally, in every one of those local shopping centers, a full service grocery store.
Do you have any strong feelings about our architectural heritage?
As a sort of, Vancouver, founded in 1886, we're pretty young, right?
We were in Gastown last night, so that's probably where a lot of it is.
Most of it's there, yeah. And there are people who say that, all of our neighborhoods are so unique and special. And I kind of look at, it's kind of like DNA. Like there's 4 bases of DNA, and maybe 5, adenosine, cytosine, thymine, and guanine are the 4 amino acids that form your DNA. Well, we've got Craftsman cottage homes. A lot of our neighborhoods are very similar. I think there are things that are worth preserving. Like I think, Gastown, Yaletown, there's some really great historic buildings. But for the most part, I think much of our city can be redeveloped, renewed. I'm not so beholden.
What are some of the appreciable changes in urban design that we can embrace today? I think mass timber seems to be sort of taking off. The feel and look of wood construction has, I think, been very appealing, and there's something very local about it. I'd love to see that as a kind of a breakout result of these changes that are happening right now. But I think Vancouver, probably worldwide, I think the work that the city's planning department did in sort of envisioning a family first, high density downtown core in high rise formats, and taming the high rise is probably arguably Vancouver's biggest contribution to urbanism, globally, is the Point Tower podium. Stealing the row houses of the British and then putting a slender point tower on top of it, gives you great density, eyes on the street, kind of a human scale base. That's one. I think there's a lot of potential for mass timber. Absolutely. I think we definitely high-rise development at intensity to accommodate the folks who are going to live here. But I am a fan too of wood development. It's got lower embodied carbon. It's actually carbon sequestration if you replant those trees properly that were used to build the homes. And you can get now, of course, taller buildings in mass timber,
a little bit of a premium even against concrete construction. So people who say it's vastly cheaper to build in wood, no, with mass timber, it's as expensive or perhaps slightly more at this point. But I think there's lots of room there. The new building code changes around single stair access will allow some taller buildings that generate more homes. With more efficiency, you don't have to give up so much space for internal corridors, and you can actually create multifamily buildings, good quality units on smaller properties. So I think there's some of that as well too. I mean, I was working in London from 2013 to 2016. I was working for Grosvenor, so a 340-year-old company that built Mayfair and Pimlico, and while I was there, we were just looking at the way they redevelop buildings. But I was looking back at home and thinking about my retrofitting suburbs master's thesis and thinking about Vancouver specials. And I said, no, we need a new. This is 2015. I think we need a new Vancouver special. Not two homes in one, but 4 homes in one, or maybe 6 homes where there was one. And of course, that's now become a reality as well too. So I think we have a lot of options ahead in terms of multiplexes. Tall wood. I think we should be a leader in tall wood. Come on, we own. We've got all these forests. Mm-hmm. We used to have quite an interesting wood manufacturing industry here in BC as well too. There's I think Weyerhaeuser had a big research facility out at EBC. And of course, it's a very typical Canadian story, bought out by a U.S. firm, and then all the intelligence and technology and
moved
R&D,
to Atlanta or something.
Moved south of the border. Yeah. We should fight that. I mean, Canadians really need to, and again, that ties back into our innovation, our productivity challenges. Like there's room for us to be leaders in modular construction and in CLT. Wood construction as well too, and out of the Netherlands. I mean, for people very concerned about emissions, embodied carbon, and emissions from building in high-rise forms, we're seeing out of the Netherlands and cool places in Europe all sorts of hybrid concrete buildings that use mass timber and concrete in interesting ways, and we're seeing some interesting evolution of concrete technology as well too for low carbon forms. So
we're feeling pretty bullish about where things are going in terms of construction, in terms of design. And
I think so. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Talk to you about, we're really emphasizing rental as a housing form right now. And this is, I think the market conditions are playing into the fact that ownership is a little more elusive. But when I was on the City Planning Commission back in 2008 with Seti Pendiker, and he was a driver on us creating what eventually became, I think, the first city-led rental initiative called STIR that Division Vancouver brought forward. And the conversations I remember us having, again, before it was enacted as public policy, is does creating rental housing in a city that really emphasizes either strata or ownership housing constitute a public benefit? And I think what happened later is that the sort of leaders of the day decided the answer was yes. And so as a result, we're getting a lot of rental built right now, but the public benefit is in the fact that it's rental. It's not contributing in the same ways and the types of fees that you talked about earlier that will allow us to build more amenities. And so there is a fissure there. I would sort of describe it as that there are people who are demanding more of that kind of community amenity, but at the same time, for people to get into the housing here at all, rental is the way to go. So, can we unpack that sort of dichotomy a little bit, and whether it's time for us to start talking more openly about attainable home ownership?
I think so. I think what's the back to that push, for a lot of young families just starting, earn reasonable money in their careers and looking for places to buy. I mean, everyone knows there's value in owning your own home. You build equity. You've got control over your future. And I think Canadians on the whole are still a home owning kind of nation. And frankly, since the inception of the Strata Property Act in the 70s, the multifamily strata has been that route for affordable ownership options in a city where, the single family home, I mean, good grief, it's $2, $3, $4 million now on the or more, well in excess of local incomes. So multifamily is absolutely the way to go. More compact forms of ownership housing, and we can do compact 2s and 3s that are completely livable and usable and give people a place to live with their families at lower cost. So yeah, definitely. And I think we ignore the affordable ownership segment of the market at our own peril, because the less ownership opportunities the whole industry creates. This is the planning regulation system, the taxation system, the extraction system through the rezoning process for new housing, where cities are. I think in a way we've the law of unintended consequences. If we have cities that say, well, when we increase the density on this site, we want 3/4 of the new value of the property, and we're gonna do the calculation based on a sales price of, let's just pulling it out of the sky, like $1,800 a square foot, which is insane, like luxury pricing for the top end of the market. The person building that housing literally has no option but to sell that housing for $1,800 a square foot. Like, you have to. So I think our CAC system inadvertently has made every new condo a diamond, by the demands of the local government, but then also all the other fees and levies on top. But I do think we really need to focus on how can we create reasonably affordable, attainable housing for middle-income folks. And if we don't, all of those families are going to be, in a sense, stuck in the rental market, which isn't helping rental availability, affordability either. It's putting more pressure. So I think we do need to focus on that. When I grad student, I bought a loft apartment at Seymour and Smythe. I didn't have a job yet. I just got out of grad school. I had $5,000 in an RSP. I pulled that out. I borrowed another $2,000, and I got a down payment. And I signed my life away for $129,000 for a small loft apartment, double height kind of mezzanine thing. It was very cool. And I thought I was nuts. And then I got a few years later. That was me, my partner, and a dog. 16-year-old dog with a 17-year-old bladder. Poor thing. But then we, then got married, had a kid, moved into a 2-bedroom at Alberni and Butte, 800 square feet, furnished. You wouldn't believe everything. Didn't just move in with a suitcase. $200,000. And then bought a few years after that, sold that. Should never have sold it. And then bought a townhouse in Main and 26th area. For, I forget, 400 and change. There were opportunities for us. We used to have, in terms of ownership housing, we used to have market segments. We had an entry level, like that $129,000 little starter loft condo. It was a 1-bedroom with a bedroom upstairs. Middle market housing and luxury housing. I think the way that our systems evolved, and we have to look at ourselves as city, from the city perspective, and say, well, the rules and regulations that we put on ownership housing, how are they affecting the market? Are they encouraging a middle income ownership market, or are they inhibiting it? I think there are things we could do is similar to rental, where we create incentives for more affordable ownership. There's some questions it raises in terms of, okay, who gets it? How is that value protected, in terms of, I don't know, if it's a below market ownership home, you could do shared equity, where somebody holds.
Well, there are models elsewhere.
There are models, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think it's something we really need to focus on.
How familiar are you with the provincial policy changes that have been enacted in the last several months that cities are responding to?
Oh, yeah, in the thick of it.
Yeah. I can fully appreciate that this was really being driven by a whole set of factors, but I suppose the drumbeat around frustrations with local governments perhaps maybe not working to get projects through the pipeline. Market conditions completely changed with higher interest rates and inflation sort of post-pandemic. I feel like a little bit of the political environment that we're facing going into the fall provincial election right now is being driven a little bit by that. Thinking of some voices that have been quite loud, being critical of the provincial government on that one. But here in the city of Vancouver, we, for the most part, have been very collaborative on this one and decided that we are, we have a duty here. We are bound to kind of respond to it and develop new policies. So our teams have been doing that. And I think it will help over the long term. But I guess what I'm asking is, how much pressure do we put on the publics to accept new density, new attention to?
Yeah. I'm frankly, I think I'm pretty impressed by some of the changes from the minister and the housing minister. I think there are a lot of municipalities that did need a push where we weren't seeing very accommodating decisions on major land use applications around transit. There are cities that were doing great jobs, in terms of planning intensity around transit and moving ahead with lots, very kind of let's say a permissive planning environment. I think it was necessary to unlock sometimes. I mean, I travel the Expo line, and look around Nanaimo Station. I mean, that station's been there for 40 years, and it's just still surrounded by a sea of single-family homes. I think there are a lot of underused sites, well served by mass, high-speed, high-frequency, mass rapid transit that are essential in terms of, accommodating people in a growing region without needing to drive around everywhere. You're actually solving a lot of problems by creating as of right land uses around those things. I think we've done I think overall an okay job with transit, like as a middle class option for getting around. But I think the stations I think we've really underperformed in terms of planning around stations historically. I mean, even I was at Langara 49th the other day on the Canada line, Cambie on the Canada line, and it's like, there's a station where there's not even a little shop next to it. Didn't include like a little convenience store. There's nothing above it. It's right next to a college university. I think we really undershoot relative to say Europe. Where they go big and do great things around transit. So I think it's necessary. It's a forward thinking thing. I know so I serve as a director on the board of Urbanarium, and we're planning a debate about this. Is it a revolution versus evolution? Was the province too heavy-handed in coming down with this legislation?
Oh, wow.
So we're setting up a little debate. Yeah. But a lot of countries do this. The Netherlands, they've got a lot of sort of top-down planning imperatives from the top, and then the local governments have to sort of enact and sort that. They're very careful about setting targets for planning. So I think this is one of those cases.
Yeah, much of the Cambie line reminds me of a little station in Rosedale in Toronto that it's just got houses around it, and I thought that's not well. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on that particular station in Toronto, but I think we've built so quickly that we didn't have time to really plan and think about those neighborhoods. And now that the conversation is now, look, where are we going to get more retail in there? Where are going to places for people to gather and assemble? And that has to follow.
Yeah, there's a lot of local planning, I think, that needs to be done in terms of how do you implement these in ways where you can create. I mean, learning from we know how to do high intensity with high amenity. I think there's this sort of misperception that high intensity neighborhoods are low livability neighborhoods. No, the downtown proves quite the opposite. The fact that people are willing to pay the prices that they're paying for the downtown living reflects the fact that they're highly livable and they're highly in demand. So that sort of Point Tower, Podium, local shops at grade, we know the recipe. Like we're known globally for high intent, for family friendly, family first, multi-family, high intensity development. So I think we're in an exceptional position to deliver really interesting neighborhoods that great. More ownership housing opportunities, more rental opportunities, more local shops and services. I think we're in a good position. We're not. It's not a bad thing.
I know that you do some work with some of the local First Nations, so I want to ask you a question just for our listeners to try to help a little understand what's happening right now. Recently, City Council passed a framework for for UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I consider it a really high watermark for the city government, for this council. I'm very proud to have been a part of that, and I know it's work that is really beginning right now. But for people outside looking in, Vancouver clearly is demonstrating leadership by moving this far along in working with local First Nations. But what does it mean from your standpoint? What is it going to mean for the future of our city and certainly our work with the local First Nations?
Yeah, I think across Canada, all levels of government are sort of reconciling the relationship with First Nations. Given the fact that for most of the country, I guess west of the Rockies, no treaties were negotiated. So I think we are seeing First Nations emerging as major development forces in cities. Of course, in Vancouver, with the MST, the Musqueam-Tsleil-Waututh Squamish partnership with Canada Lands, Jericho Lands, with the Squamish Nation, building out Sanok at the foot of the Burrard Street Bridge, 6,000 rental homes. They are the approving authority. I think cities across Canada are going to be figuring out how to reconcile these new relationships and seeing First Nations as self-determining, self-governing entities. And I think the nations are getting much more sophisticated in how they plan development and seeing, I guess, development as an economic driver for the nations, but also I think win-wins in terms of addressing current needs. So, a lot of debate around Sanok. I can't wait till it opens. It's going to be very interesting to see how this neighborhood plays out, and I think it's going to turn out to be to surprise people in terms of livability, its contribution to the city. And I think we're seeing more and more now the presence of First Nations culture and history. I think it's a rich area that we can all learn and grow from.
So just with a kind of final question and a thought, and trying to leave on an optimistic note, because my nature is to try and see the glasses half full most of the time. And before we started recording, I talked a little bit about there's a thread out there that talks about, and really tied back to the cost of housing especially, that there's a little sense of concern or despair and fear for the future in some ways. For those who are feeling that way, give us the reasons for feeling really optimistic about being and living in this city, because I do think it's a wonderful, great place, but I do also think that we have to work every day to try and make sure that it is affordable, accessible, and equitable as possible.
Yeah. I don't think Vancouver is going to get any less desirable in the next 100 years. It's going to become more desirable. We're looking at environmental quality. We're seeing places in the world that are hitting 50 Celsius. I think Vancouver still has great environmental quality, although we're feeling the effects of climate change as well. We're seeing stresses in terms of civil society, public disorder, this terrible addiction problem, which has grown worse. In my 35 years, I had to steer my toddler 2 days ago around a bus stop at 37th and Cambie with a person pulled out a sheet of tinfoil and was smoking meth on a bus stop seat, next pretty close to my 23-month-old. I thought this just can't. We have to address these things. But we're a wealthy nation. We can sort this out. It's a health issue. Housing. I think we have such creative developers and planners. I think if we get together and figure out how to work things out and create incentives for delivering affordability, I think we've seen provincial, federal governments trying to intervene to sort of shape the market, to shape demand with various policies. I think we need actually to get all those 4 levels of government, 5 if you include the First Nations, together to sort of harmonize some of these things. Healthcare, yeah, a little under stress, but we still have a great healthcare system. We have a great education system. It's one of the strongest pulls. I think it's unrecognized as well too, underrecognized, underappreciated for its contribution to the city. We have what, 3? How many major universities do we have now in Vancouver? There used to be just UBC. Now we've got SFU, UBC, Emily Carr, Langara. That's going to be a powerful draw. Yeah. Have no fear. We're going to be a very desirable place to live, but we do have challenges. We've got a very creative development planning community, and if we're just nimble, I think on the public service side, we have to be way more nimble. We have a lot of great developers for whom profit's not the only bottom line. There are a lot of companies that really want to do good things. And let's just bring all those people together. I'm happy to. I'm ecstatic about being part of it. This isn't work for me anymore. Really, honestly, I don't think of what I do as work. It's a mission. It's fun. It's creative, and I love it. And, I'm very hopeful for Vancouver.
That's great to hear, and I agree with you. I get to meet a lot of the people that you described that are really driven by passion and very much believe in the city, and I would say that the people I work with here at the City of Vancouver too really have that same view on what we're doing as well. So Michael, really appreciate this conversation. I know we could talk a lot longer, and we will continue to talk in the future, but thanks very much for coming on Vancouver Overcast.
You're welcome.